A wonderful show. I think it lasted 5 or 6 or 7 years, something like that. And it actually was a date night, me and my wife.
At the age of 74, Richard Gere, the man who once stole hearts in Pretty Woman and American Gigolo, didn't talk about his career, his movies, or his accolades. Instead, he offered a vulnerable confession about love, a moment so raw it seemed to pause the world. "I didn't get divorced because they were wrong," he admitted. "I got divorced because I wasn't good enough to make it last." For a man once crowned the most charming figure in Hollywood and having walked down the aisle 3 separate times, this revelation was striking. Richard Gere had finally recognized that love isn't simply about meeting the right person. It's about being the right person, and doing so at the right moment. Though he had once been with some of the most stunning women alive, even marrying one of the top supermodels in the world, it wasn't until his 70s that he discovered a love that didn't demand effort, performance, or reinvention. A love that simply was. He found a woman who didn't try to fix him, but chose to remain. And with sincerity, Gere said, "She is the love of my life." This isn't just another celebrity love story. It's the transformation of a man, one who journeyed from the heights of fame to deep solitude, from emotional uncertainty to inner peace, from the desire to control to the will to understand. It's the odyssey of learning to love not by instinct, but by evolving through experience. Before he ever became a romantic icon on the silver screen, Richard Gere was a tall, skinny kid from Pennsylvania. He played trumpet, wrote music for school plays, and studied philosophy at the University of Massachusetts. But he walked away from it all to follow the call of the theater, a space where he could explore other identities, live, alternate lives. From early on, it seemed that Gere became adept at embodying the role of the suave, charming man, both on and off the screen. With his magnetic good looks and an enigmatic quietness, Richard Gere never lacked female attention. Yet, as elusive as he was in character, so were his real-life relationships, passionate, short-lived, and never quite within his grasp. His early romances burned bright but faded fast. There was Carol Mallory, the fiery model who once described him as a shooting star across the night sky. Dawn Steele, a former Penthouse editor who broke ground as the first female head of a major Hollywood studio. Penelope Milford, his Days of Heaven co-star who stood by him through the 70s. And Sylvia Martins, the woman who introduced him to Nepal, Tibetan lamas, and the teachings of Buddhism. These were no ordinary women, brilliant, bold, and unforgettable. But back then, love to Richard Gere was another step in his ongoing journey of self-discovery. He rose in Hollywood, from looking for Mr. Goodbar to American Gigolo, yet at the same time, he was quietly unraveling. No one had taught him how to make love last. The parties, the camera flashes, the lonely hotel nights. They all blended into a portrait of a man adored by the world but searching for something he couldn't name. Perhaps it was this internal void that kept him from committing fully. The relationships passed like seasons, beautiful but temporary, because even Gere himself hadn't yet discovered what it was he needed. Not yet anchored, not yet ready, he lived life on the fast track with no thought of slowing down. Then came 1988 at a Beverly Hills barbecue hosted by photographer Herb Ritz, when 39-year-old Richard Gere met Cindy Crawford, a 22-year-old supermodel gracing the world's most glamorous magazine covers. They were from distinctly different worlds. He, a veteran actor dubbed the sexiest man alive. She, a rising force in fashion. Still, they fell quickly, deeply, suddenly, passionately. Soon, they were living together in New York. The public was mesmerized. The suave Richard Gere, the graceful Cindy Crawford. They embodied the fantasy couple of the 1990s. They graced red carpets, glossy covers, and ad campaigns. But behind the glamour were two souls drifting in opposite directions. Cindy Crawford was still carving out her identity. Growing up too fast in a spotlight she hadn't fully adjusted to, she wrestled with the blurred lines between who she really was and the icon the world expected her to be. Every photo shoot, every commercial, was a performance. She was struggling to maintain an idealized image while barely holding on to her authentic self. Meanwhile, Richard Gere had grown weary of the spotlight. After 2 decades as the fantasy man of Hollywood, he longed for quietude. He turned inward, toward meditation, Buddhist practice, and humanitarian efforts. While Cindy was airborne, hopping from promotion to photo shoot, Richard sat in silence, seeking peace. They married quietly in 1991 during an impromptu Las Vegas ceremony, exchanging silver foil rings. No guests, no fanfare, just a fragile hope that love alone could steady them. But marriage isn't a solution to emotional drift. When he sat in stillness, she kept chasing motion. She once confessed, "I tried to become the woman he needed, and I lost myself." Their divorce in 1995 came not with scandal, but with silence. There were no legal wars, no dramatic headlines. The media was left puzzled, grasping for answers. What went wrong with the couple who seemed perfect? Decades later, Richard Gere gave a rare but poignant insight. "I loved a woman who hadn't yet discovered who she was," he said. "And I believed that my love could give her stability, but that was unfair to both of us." There were no villains, just poor timing. One was still in flight, the other had already landed. Following their split, Richard Gere retreated from flashy romances. The tabloid-friendly pairings ceased. Instead, he pursued introspection, journeying through Asia, deepening his spiritual path, and embracing slower, more meaningful roles. And then, like the calm after a long storm, Carrie Lowell entered his life. Known for her role as a Bond girl in License to Kill, Carrie was elegant, grounded, and tranquil. A woman free from Hollywood spectacle. In Richard Gere's eyes, she seemed like a sanctuary. They began dating in 1995, living in quiet companionship. In 2000, their son Homer James Jigme Gere was born, marking a turning point in Gere's life, the first time he felt. Richard Gere embraced fatherhood later in life, becoming a dad at 51. In 2002, he and Carrie Lowell tied the knot in a private, understated ceremony. There were no paparazzi, no media frenzy, just a simple family union. They chose to settle down in Pound Ridge, New York, away from the Hollywood glare. There, Carrie focused on motherhood, while Richard immersed himself in gardening, reading, selecting thoughtful film roles, and continuing his spiritual and humanitarian pursuits. Yet, what appeared serene on the outside masked a growing emotional distance within. Sometimes, what we call stability is merely two people tolerating a quiet drift. Richard, deeply introspective by nature, often secluded himself in meditation retreats across Tibet and Nepal, captivated by philosophies rooted in detachment and inner stillness. Carrie, while no longer active in showbiz, still needed connection, energy, and a sense of community to feel alive. Over time, their public appearances dwindled. Film festivals and red carpet events began to show them separately, one attending while the other was absent. It became clear to observers that their lives no longer moved in sync. The silence between them became telling. In 2013, after nearly 2 decades together and 11 years of marriage, Carrie Lowell filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences. Behind the legal phrasing was a more personal truth. Carrie reportedly felt emotionally excluded, as if she lived in a house whose emotional keys she no longer held. Richard, meanwhile, believed in the peace of silence, until silence became an alarm he could no longer ignore. When silence lingers too long, he would later reflect, it stops being peace and starts becoming absence. The divorce extended over 3 years, not due to emotional bitterness, but because of drawn-out financial negotiations. Disputes arose over property worth over $45 million and homes in multiple locations. Still, through the complications, they reached one essential agreement: to share custody of their son, Homer, a quiet, thoughtful boy who bore much of his father's calm demeanor. Neither Richard nor Carrie commented publicly following their separation. No blame was assigned. No scandals surfaced. Just a heavy, shared understanding that their paths had gently diverged. It wasn't betrayal or infidelity. It was two honest people realizing they could no longer bridge the emotional space between them. After the divorce, Richard Gere vanished from the public eye. There were no interviews, no appearances at premieres, no new headlines. Many believed he had chosen a life of solitude, devoting himself to meditation, fatherhood, and quiet contemplation. Then, just when the world assumed he had stopped seeking love, Richard Gere unexpectedly reappeared in 2014 alongside a new figure, Padma Lakshmi, the acclaimed model, author, and host of Top Chef. It was a brief, low-key relationship that sparked curiosity, but never turned into media fodder. There were no posed photographs, no red carpet strolls, only quiet whispers and a few dinner sightings. At the time, Richard was still in the midst of finalizing his divorce from Carrie Lowell, while Padma had recently endured her own emotional wounds. Having parted ways with billionaire Teddy Forstmann, the man who had played a fatherly role to her daughter. Both carried emotional weight, but in one another they found a shared tenderness, an ease not born of passion, but of understanding. During those few months they shared peaceful moments, long talks, unpretentious dinners, a sense of emotional refuge. But soon, reality stepped in. Richard, seeking deeper stillness and a life of spiritual retreat, and Padma, vibrant and engaged with the world of television and global events, realized their lives were unfolding in different rhythms. After roughly 6 months, they gently parted ways, without resentment or scandal. A mutual friend described the split simply. They were just better off as friends. Their lives were too different. If anything remained from their time together, it was the image of a man who had finally stopped searching for someone to complete him. Richard Gere was no longer clinging to love out of loneliness. He had learned to sit still with himself. He began to understand that even love, if mismatched in timing or values, cannot always hold two people together. And it was perhaps from this clarity that he finally let go. Not just of a partner, but of the need to find one. They say love finds you when you least expect it. For Richard Gere, after 3 marriages, numerous passionate flings, and years of inner work, love came not with fireworks, but with quiet resonance. That love was Alejandra Silva, a Spanish activist whose presence was more grounding than glamorous. She wasn't a supermodel like Cindy Crawford. She hadn't shared a Hollywood spotlight like Carrie Lowell. But she had something else. A soft strength, soulful eyes, and a heart devoted to humanitarian work. A single mother running the RAIS Foundation in Madrid to fight homelessness, Alejandra had endured her own difficult divorce. She once said, "I don't do charity to be seen. I do it because if I can't give myself fully, I'd rather not do it at all." In 2014, at her family's hotel in Positano, Italy, fate quietly reconnected them. Richard, fresh from emotional closure, and Alejandra, immersed in her own healing, met again. Neither was looking for love, but when they looked at each other, they didn't see baggage. They saw a possibility of something peaceful and lasting. Richard took the initiative, not with grand gestures, but with sincerity. He sent flowers every day. He wrote songs. He penned letters, real, handwritten letters, expressing not desire, but steadiness. "I'll be here," he seemed to say, "if you want someone who won't run." Initially, Alejandra hesitated. The 33-year age gap was significant. She knew he was a global icon. She didn't want to be another woman in Richard Gere's life. But he didn't rush her. He didn't persuade her. He just waited. Eventually, she saw what this was. Not a fling, not a savior, but a shared peace. They married in April 2018 in a serene Buddhist ceremony in New York. Alejandra embraced Buddhism, not because he asked her to, but because she found in its teachings the same stillness she saw in Richard. "I noticed the age difference," she later said, "but when the spiritual connection is strong enough, all differences fall away." Richard became a father for the first time at 51. In 2002, he and Carrie Lowell wed in an intimate ceremony. No photographers, no press, no red carpet fanfare. It was a private celebration with just family, held far from the glare of Hollywood. They made their home in Pound Ridge, New York, where Carrie focused on motherhood, and Richard immersed himself in growing vegetables, reading, acting selectively, and continuing his philanthropic pursuits. But what appeared to be harmony on the surface masked a quiet unraveling beneath. Despite the peaceful surroundings, the couple slowly began to drift apart. Richard was deeply introspective, often vanishing into long meditation retreats in Tibet or Nepal, captivated by the ideas of detachment and inner silence. Carrie, though she had stepped away from acting, still craved social connection, movement, and a sense of external engagement. Over time, they stopped appearing together at public events. One would attend alone while the other remained unseen. Though no harsh words were spoken, the silence between them became a language of its own. In 2013, after 11 years of marriage and 18 years as partners, Carrie Lowell filed for divorce. The reason cited was irreconcilable differences, but friends close to the couple suggested a deeper cause. Carrie felt like a guest in her own home, unable to reach the inner world her husband had built. Richard, who believed silence symbolized peace, failed to realize that prolonged silence could also mean distance. "I didn't hear it," he would later reflect. Their divorce took 3 years to finalize, not due to lingering emotional wounds, but due to disputes over their combined assets, estimated at over $45 million, including multiple properties. Yet amid the complications, one thing remained clear. They both agreed on joint custody of their son, Homer, described by many as quiet and thoughtful, just like his father. Neither Richard nor Carrie ever publicly addressed their split. All that remained was an air of quiet sorrow. No betrayal, no scandal. Just two souls who had honored their own truths and could no longer reach each other. After parting ways with Carrie, Richard Gere disappeared from the spotlight. No more glitzy events, no press interviews, no red carpets. Many assumed he had chosen a life of solitude, living out his days as a father, a spiritual seeker, and a contemplative man. But then, in a quiet twist of fate, love appeared again. In 2014, while still finalizing his divorce from Carrie, Richard was spotted with Padma Lakshmi, the model, author, and host of Top Chef. Their relationship was never center stage. No red carpet walks, no press confirmations, just whispers of long conversations backstage at a charity gala, and the occasional dinner out. Both were emerging from heartbreak, Richard from an 18-year relationship, Padma from a painful separation with billionaire Teddy Forstman, whom she called the spiritual father of her daughter. Their bond was tender, not explosive, a mutual recognition of two tired hearts finding a moment of stillness. But they were on diverging paths. Richard longed for stillness and simplicity. Padma thrived in the fast-paced world of television and global causes. After 6 months, they parted ways amicably. No drama, just mutual respect. A source said, they decided friendship made more sense. Their lives were simply going in different directions. That brief interlude marked a shift in Richard. He no longer pursued love to fill a void. He wasn't looking for salvation in someone else's arms. He had begun to understand that peace couldn't be forced, and sometimes love wasn't about staying. It was about knowing when to let go. And from that stillness, something new began to grow. Then came Alejandra Silva. They say when you stop chasing love, it finds you. That's exactly how Richard Gere, after 3 marriages and a lifetime of romantic entanglements, finally encountered the love that asked nothing of him. Alejandra Silva, a Spanish activist with gentle eyes and a soft spirit, never imagined she'd fall in love again. She had just finalized her own divorce, was raising her son alone, and running the Reyes Foundation, which combats homelessness in Madrid. She once slept on the streets to better understand the pain of the homeless and famously said, "If I can't give my whole self to something, I'd rather not do it at all." They reconnected in 2014 at a hotel in Positano, Italy, owned by Alejandra's family. Richard was quietly moving on from his second marriage, and Alejandra was emotionally drained from her own. But when they looked at each other, they didn't see baggage. They saw a gentle future. Richard pursued her slowly. Flowers, handwritten songs, personal letters, no grand declarations, just the quiet message, "I'm here, if you want someone beside you." Alejandra hesitated. A 33-year age gap, a world-famous man. She wasn't looking to be someone's next chapter. But Richard didn't try to persuade. He waited, until she saw it wasn't a performance. It was real. A quiet place to land. They married in April 2018 in a Buddhist ceremony in New York. Alejandra embraced Richard's faith not out of obligation, but because she found herself within it. "I didn't ignore the age gap," she said. "But when two souls connect at a karmic level, the differences become secondary." Later, she told Hola, "Meeting Richard Gere felt like someone pulling me out of darkness and showing me the way. I was lost. He was the light." The couple settled in Pound Ridge, the same town where Richard once lived with Carrie. But this time, he didn't build metaphorical walls. Their home remained open, fluid, peaceful. In 2019, they welcomed their first son, Alexander. In 2020, their second child was born. The name kept private, the joy not. Alejandra occasionally shared serene glimpses of their life on Instagram, meditations, nature walks, and their children reaching for the golden leaves of autumn. Richard Gere once said of his wife, "She's the funniest, smartest, most sensitive, brave woman. I don't need her to be anyone else, and I don't try to be the perfect husband. We live closely, with no need to explain ourselves." Alejandra calls him the kindest man I've ever met. He writes her music in the morning, still sends flowers, holds his sons at bedtime. No performance, just presence. People ask, how do you keep love alive? For Richard and Alejandra, it's simple. They don't try to control each other. They walk together, not behind or ahead, but side by side. He is quiet, meditative. She is socially engaged, passionately advocating for the voiceless. And they don't love each other despite their differences, but through them. This is not the urgent passion of youth. This is the calm flame of maturity. They had both known loss, heartbreak, disappointment, but neither lost their ability to love. And when they found each other, they didn't try to fill holes. They came as whole people, complete and content. Richard didn't need a movie romance. Alejandra didn't need a savior. They met when neither was trying to impress. No public contracts, no glossy magazine features, just quiet songs, handwritten letters, and the gentle laughter of their sons over dinner. As Richard Gere once said, "If you want someone to stay, never make them feel like they have to try so hard to be loved." It took him a lifetime to understand that. And for Alejandra, after surviving a painful divorce, love became not a place to disappear, but a place where she could finally be fully herself. They don't monitor each other's movements. They don't explain their emotions. They show up. They're present. And in that rare kind of silence, something lasting has bloomed. At 74, Richard Gere is no longer the man whose face adorned every screen. He now lives far from flashing cameras in a quiet farmhouse. He doesn't attend premieres or do press tours. He might not be working on a film at all. And if he is, it's likely an indie project that needs no box office validation. He walks his dog along stone paths, reads Buddhist texts, plays piano for his sons, and drives them to school in an old SUV. No bodyguards, no press. His activism for Tibet and human rights continues, as does Alejandra's leadership of the RAIS Foundation in Spain. But now, their efforts are rooted in silence. No cameras, no speeches, just genuine work done for the sake of others. Their rare public moments are simple. An autumn photo, a quiet Christmas greeting captioned, "From our home to yours, wishing you peace." Richard Gere once said, "I don't need Hollywood to know that I exist." And so, without making any declarations, he stepped away, not in protest, but in peace. Once celebrated for his charisma on screen, Richard Gere now plays a role far more important than any he's ever portrayed: a father, a husband, and a man at peace.